So let's continue with sport. We said that sport goes back to the etymon disport, deriving from French, and then something happened, of course. It's a second syllable stress, the first syllable is weakened, and there is a clipping. So disport, the first syllable is more or less clipped, the S stays with the stressed syllable, that's the case, and sport, disport becomes sport, or sport later on. Right. And now let's go back to sport and delve deeper into the different meanings the word had and probably has today. This is, again, Shakespeare. Iago to Rodrigo in Othello. Iago trying to convince Rodrigo to cuckold Othello by sleeping with Desdemona. He says, let us be conjunctive in our revenge against Othello. If thou canst cuckold him, thou dost thyself a pleasure, me a sport. Those two things mean the same thing, pleasure and sport. Very funny. I looked up some German translations, and most of them translate, thou dost ourselves a pleasure. Okay? So they just use the one word because they mean the same thing. Seeing Othello suffer would certainly be a pleasure for Iago. Okay? And this is what it means here. Let's go on. Again, King Lear, somewhat earlier, Gloucester uses the word sport also. Somewhat earlier than what we had before, when he talks about his illegitimate son, Edmund. He says, but I have, sir, a son by order of law, some year older than this, who yet is no dearer in my account. He talks about Edgar here. Though this knave, and this is Edmund, came something saucily to the world before he was sent for, yet was his mother fair, there was good sport at his making, and the whoreson must be acknowledged. Thing is, there was good sport at his making. Good fun at his making, at his conception. And here, certainly sport refers to sexual activity. Here. There was good sport. I mean, Edmund is a illegitimate son, his mother being a prostitute or something similar, and there was good sport at his making, and the whoreson, when he says whoreson, which means son of a prostitute, of course, must be acknowledged. The important thing is sexual connotation of sport, which you have quite a lot. I mean, if you look at this, very famous poem of the 17th century, Andrew Marvell to his coy mistress, had we but world enough and time, and so on. It's the carpe diem, it's the speaker trying to convince his addressee to give in to his sexual advances, because time is running out. She will be ugly sooner or later, and he probably impotent or something like that. Therefore, they should sport now. It's the carpe diem, ultimately going back to Horace, all right, and in Renaissance times very often used in order to convince the lady to have sex, particularly in metaphysical poetry. Gather your rosebuds while you can, time is still a-flying. Robert Herrick, I think Herrick. Don't pin me down on that. Okay, now let us sport us while we may. He says, now let's have fun in a sexual way, all right? While we may. The whole poem is about convincing her to have sex with him, and sport here is, of course, sexual activity. Yes, so in Renaissance times, we saw this in Gloucester's speech, and we see that here sport must have been used, and was used, certainly, for fun in a sexual context. So, yes, here I have it once again. The carpe diem, have fun, now let us sport us, let us have sex as long as we still may. Now, let's have a look at the OED, and you always should have a look at the OED. okay? Sports, today. Well, it's the plural, but never mind. An activity involving physical exertion and skill, especially particularly modern use, one regulated by set rules or customs in which an individual or team competes against another or others, frequently in plural. Okay, this is the sense we have today. We talked about this. Interesting is the explanation here, which is following. In early use, the sense of sport as a diversion or amusement is paramount. This is what we had. By the 18th and 19th century, the term was often used with reference to hunting, shooting, and fishing. See blood, field sports, and so on. The consolidation of organized sport, football, rugby, cricket, and athletics, in the 19th century reinforced the notion of sport as physical competition. So what they say, I mean, in the 19th century, sport became sort of institutionalized by set rules and something like this. And this all goes back to the 19th century, particularly to Britain, the British, who invented a lot of sports, modern sports, including football and golf and what have you. Physical competition. And so the 19th century is the concept changes insofar as sport gets organized and so on. And now, of course, the denomination does and is narrowed to this new thing. This is more or less what the OED says, and this makes perfect sense. Therefore, I would like to turn it the other way round now and have a look. What role does the modern sport, sense of sport, play in former times? So that's a question. Okay, if I say the word has narrowed in its meaning and was once broader, it once entailed, of course, sport in our modern use, and what role did it play then? And what does it tell us about Renaissance culture, for example? And I would like to turn to Henry V now, Act 1, Scene 2. This is the quotation here. The context is that Henry is about waging war with France because of some claim he thinks he has going back to some ancient laws, something like this, on France. The French king, including the Dauphin, of course, they don't like it at all. And they make fun of Henry because he wouldn't stand a chance. Anyway, they think, entering France with the French people being much more numerous than the English, than this Agincourt and so on. This is the context. Another context is that Henry has the reputation of being interested in anything but politics. If you read Henry IV, where Harry appears, or Hall appears as the king's son, he's only interested in, reveling, wassailing in pubs and taverns, playing games, having fun, yes, and not behaving like one who is going to be king sooner or later. Now we have this here, and there's the French ambassador, okay, who now, in a way, presents the Dauphin's answer to King Henry's claim on some French dukedom or something. In answer of which claim, the prince, our master, says that you savor too much of your youth, and bids you be advised there's naught in France that can be with a nimble galliard one. You cannot revel into dukedoms there. So that's interesting, what I've highlighted here. A nimble galliard is a dance, fun entertainment, okay? Renaissance dance, and nimble galliard, nimble means light-hearted, something like this. You cannot revel into dukedoms, you cannot drink yourself or party yourself into dukedoms there. And then he goes on and says, therefore he sends you a present and so on, and then he puts a box in front of Henry, and Henry says, what treasure, uncle? And Exeter opens it and he says, tennis balls, my liege. So here you see, I mean, in order to make fun of Henry and of his reputation that he is only fun-loving and was only interested in his pleasure as a young man, they sent him tennis balls, something to play tennis with. And so this means, if you look at this, that if you close reading, that tennis is on the same level as a galleon or revel, as drinking and dancing. Okay? It's one of those activities. Drinking, dancing, playing tennis is the same thing. Fun. And there you see, so that our modern tennis would be, of course, a very serious sport these days. In those times, it was just one, with drinking, wassailing, dancing, all these things. By the way, I mean, tennis, the French are right. I mean, in presenting, they invented tennis. Tennis. The English don't like that. But yes, they did. Tennis, tenez. Hold the ball. That's what it means in French. Tenez, tenez in Old French. Just a footnote, but we're doing historical semantics here. So it's tenez, and this means hold the ball. Okay. If you look at that here, what I find interesting, this is a contemporary, not a contemporary drawing, but this is what it looked like playing tennis at King Harry's times. They are dressed in just their ordinary clothes. They could just as well go dancing or go to an opera or to a bear baiting or whatever. And this is exactly the thing. It's just one activity, fun activity among many. Today you would get dressed and put on your tennis shirt and and things like that. No, in those days it's just, I mean, play tennis, okay. Just as if you were playing a game of chess. Get a racket and play tennis. Don't get dressed for physical exertion or anything like that. So, and only when it came to that, that this physical exertion part of it, and not the fun part of it, became stronger. Only then, of course, the concept narrowed and the denomination sport did. Okay, and we arrive here. Now, tennis being just one fun activity among many. And that's what I wanted to say. So what it all comes down to in the end, the conclusion now to my lengthy elaborations here, is that sport has changed its meaning from originally any activity being fun, including sex, yes, we have that, to an activity which is fun, it has to be fun, but entails physical exertion as well, and probably a competitive factor as well. Although this does not necessarily have to be so, if you think of jogging or something like this. But mostly it does, that sports at least have the potential, of course, that there is a competition. Running, even, you can do this. Potentially, you can compete with one another. You cannot compete with one another watching an opera or bear baiting. Okay, so this sort of notion came to the fore, and then it narrowed to what we have today. And of course, one thing is clear: there were a lot of words denoting fun in general, as the word fun does, or pleasure, or entertainment, or something like this. So it could easily be narrowed. And that's the other thing, because there were a lot of other words which you could use for the broader concept. And then you could narrow this sport thing down to what we have today. This is how it works. Okay? Right, so let's stop here.